My nephew filed a lawsuit to have me declared incompetent. He told the judge, "My uncle doesn't understand what he's doing. I should manage his $3 million, the judge asked me." I pulled out a folder I had been compiling for 2 years. When the judge, "I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I never thought my own blood would try to steal everything I'd worked for." But sitting in that courtroom, watching my nephew Brandon's face drain of color as the judge flipped through my folder, I realized I'd been naive for far too long. Let me start from the beginning. For 23 years, I worked as a civil engineer for Morrison & Associates in Portland, Oregon. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest. I designed drainage systems, reviewed blueprints, sat through endless meetings about soil composition and load-bearing capacities. By the time I turned 45, I'd saved enough to retire early. Not rich by any means, but comfortable. $3 million in various accounts and investments, a paid-off house in the suburbs, and finally, time to breathe. My wife Sandra had passed away 4 years before my retirement. Ovarian cancer. We never had children. It just never happened for us, despite trying. After she died, my family became everything. My older brother Richard, his wife Maureen, and their son Brandon. Brandon was the closest thing I had to a son. When he was young, I took him fishing, taught him to ride a bike when Richard was too busy with work, helped him with college applications. He studied business at Oregon State, graduated with decent grades, and landed a job at a mid-sized marketing firm in Seattle. I was proud of him. I really was. The first warning sign came about 2 years before the courtroom incident. Brandon had moved back to Portland after his company downsized. He was 30 at the time, living in a cramped apartment downtown, working freelance gigs that never seemed to pan out. He started visiting me more often, every Sunday at first, then twice a week, then nearly every day. At first I was touched. Here was my nephew, wanting to spend time with his aging uncle. We'd watch football together, grill steaks on my back patio, talk about nothing and everything. He asked about my health, my finances, my plans for the future. I thought he was being considerate. Then the questions got specific. "Uncle Dan, have you thought about what happens to the house when you're gone? Do you have a will? You should really have a lawyer look at that. $3 million is a lot to manage alone. Maybe you need someone to help." I brushed it off. He was just concerned, I told myself. That's what family does. But then I started forgetting things. Small things at first, where I put my keys, whether I'd taken my blood pressure medication, the name of the restaurant where Sandra and I had our first date. It troubled me. I'd always had a sharp memory. I went to see Dr. Patterson, my physician of 15 years. He ran tests, did cognitive assessments. Everything came back normal. "You're fine, Daniel," he told me. "Maybe a little stress, but nothing to worry about." Yet the forgetting continued. Worse, Brandon started commenting on it. "Uncle Dan, you already told me that story, twice. Are you sure you paid that bill? I saw it on your counter last week. Maybe you shouldn't be driving so much. I worry about you." And then, one afternoon in March, I came home to find Brandon in my study. He was sitting at my desk, my laptop open in front of him, papers spread everywhere. Bank statements, investment portfolios, the deed to my house. "What are you doing?" Something cold settled in my chest, a feeling I couldn't name. I told him to leave the papers alone, that I'd handle my own affairs. He nodded, apologized, said he was only trying to help. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake it. The way he'd been sitting there, so comfortable, so at home among my private documents, the questions about my will, the constant reminders that I was forgetting things. Was I? But once the seed was planted, I couldn't stop it from growing. I spent the next week in a fog of doubt and fear. Every forgotten word, every misplaced item became evidence against myself. Was I really slipping? Had 50 years finally caught up with me? At night, I lay awake cataloguing my lapses, turning them over like stones, searching for rot. Then I found the pills. It was a Thursday morning. I'd run out of my regular blood pressure medication and went to the medicine cabinet for a refill. Behind the orange prescription bottle, tucked into the corner, was a small, unmarked container. White pills I didn't recognize. I'd never seen them before. I took one to the pharmacy that afternoon. Mike Chen, the pharmacist who'd known me for years, turned it over in his palm. "This is diphenhydramine," he said. "High dose. Basically a sleep aid, but at this concentration, it can cause confusion, memory problems, even hallucinations in some people." He looked at me over his glasses. "Did your doctor prescribe this?" No. No one had prescribed it. I drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel. Someone had put those pills in my cabinet. Someone wanted me confused, disoriented, doubting my own mind. And there was only one person who'd been in my house often enough to do it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My nephew, the boy I'd loved like a son, was drugging me. He wanted me declared incompetent. He wanted my money. How long had it been going on? I thought back to the dinners Brandon had cooked for me, the coffee he'd brought over, the glasses of water he'd handed me with such concern. Every kindness now looked like betrayal. Every smile was a knife. I sat in my kitchen for an hour, just breathing. Fear gave way to something colder, harder, anger. But more than that, determination. If Brandon wanted a fight, he'd get one. But I wouldn't confront him, not yet. That would only warn him, give him time to cover his tracks. No, I needed to be smarter. I needed proof. That evening, I started my folder. I bought a simple 3-ring binder from the office supply store. I labeled it Home Maintenance Records and put it on my bookshelf between instruction manuals for appliances I no longer owned, hiding in plain sight. First, I documented the pills. I photographed the unmarked container, saved one tablet in a sealed envelope, and wrote down the date and location where I'd found them. Then I made an appointment with Dr. Patterson. Not just for a checkup, for a full cognitive evaluation administered by a neurologist. I wanted it in writing, from a specialist, that my mind was intact. The neurologist's name was Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. She was thorough, 4 hours of tests over 2 days. Memory recall, problem-solving, language, attention, executive function. When she called me into her office to discuss the results, I held my breath. "Mr. Carson, your cognitive function is completely normal for your age. Better than normal, actually. Your memory is excellent." She folded her hands on the desk. "Is there a reason you were concerned?" I didn't tell her about Brandon. Not yet. I just said I'd been feeling scattered lately and wanted to be sure. She noted it in my file and told me to come back in 6 months for a follow-up. One piece of evidence. One solid brick in my wall. Next, I needed to know what Brandon had accessed. I called my bank and requested records of every login to my online account for the past year. I did the same for my investment firm and my email provider. The results came within a week. Someone had logged into my accounts 17 times from an IP address that wasn't mine. The investment portfolio had been viewed repeatedly, transactions scrutinized. My email had been accessed and forwarded messages about my estate planning had been opened and read. I traced the IP address to an apartment in downtown Portland. Brandon's apartment. More bricks, more evidence. I kept adding to the folder. But gathering documents wasn't enough. I needed to understand what Brandon was actually planning. A competency hearing? A conservatorship? To find out, I needed legal advice. I made an appointment with Helen Marchetti, an elder law attorney whose office was across town. I'd never met her before. That was intentional. I didn't want anyone Brandon might know. "If someone wanted to take control of your assets," she explained, "they'd petition the court to declare you incapacitated. They'd need medical evidence, doctor's statements, cognitive evaluations, showing you can't manage your own affairs." She paused. "Do you have reason to believe someone is trying to do this?" I told her about the pills, the account access, the constant suggestions that I was losing my grip. Her expression didn't change, but something hardened in her eyes. This is more common than people think, and it's difficult to prove because the family member often looks like they're just being helpful. She leaned forward. But you're doing exactly the right thing. Documentation is everything, and you need to get ahead of this. She recommended I draft a new will and power of attorney, documents that would supersede anything Brandon might try to establish. She also suggested I consider a private investigator, someone who can document his actions independently. If this goes to court, you'll want more than your word against his. I left her office with a plan. For the first time since finding those pills, I felt something other than fear. I felt ready. The private investigator's name was Carl Reeves, ex-police detective, 20 years on the Portland force before going private. Helen Marchetti had worked with him before and vouched for his discretion. I met him at a coffee shop near the waterfront, away from my neighborhood, away from anywhere Brandon might see me. Carl was in his late 50s, heavyset, with a calm, methodical manner that immediately put me at ease. I laid out the situation: the pills, the account access, the suspicious questions about my estate. He listened without interrupting, took notes on a small pad, and when I finished, he nodded slowly. Classic financial exploitation setup, he said. The gaslighting, the isolation, making you doubt yourself. It's textbook. Your nephew's probably been planning this for a while. Can you prove it? I can document his movements, his communications, any meetings he's taking. If he's got a lawyer, I'll find out who. If he's been talking to doctors about you, I'll know. He tapped his pen on the pad. But here's the thing. If he's smart, he's going to move soon. These schemes rely on momentum. The longer you stay sharp and independent, the harder it gets for him to make his case. I hired him that afternoon. While Carl started his surveillance, I took my next official step. I visited my bank in person and spoke with the branch manager. I showed her the login records from the IP address that wasn't mine. I explained that I hadn't authorized anyone else to access my accounts. She was alarmed. Mr. Carson, this could constitute unauthorized access to financial accounts. That's a crime. I know, but I want to handle this carefully. For now, I just want to change all my passwords and security questions, and I want a note in my file that no one, absolutely no one, is authorized to make changes to my accounts except me, in person, with proper identification. She made the changes immediately. That night, I installed security cameras in my house. Small ones, discreet. One in the kitchen, one in the study, one covering the front door. If Brandon was going to keep visiting, I wanted a record. And he did keep visiting. The very next Sunday, he showed up with a 6-pack of beer and a bag of pretzels, same as always. How are you feeling, Uncle Dan? You look tired. I'm fine. You sure? You seemed confused on the phone yesterday. I hadn't been confused. The conversation had been completely normal, but he was still pushing the narrative. We watched football. He asked about my week. And all the while, the camera in the kitchen captured everything. Every leading question, every concerned frown, every subtle suggestion that I wasn't quite right. Let him perform. I was building my case. Then, 3 weeks after hiring Carl, I got a call that changed everything. You need to see this, Carl said. Can you meet me tomorrow? We met at the same coffee shop. Carl slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs. Brandon meeting with a woman outside a medical office building. And documents. Patient evaluation forms with my name on them. A preliminary psychiatric assessment. My hands went cold. He's been seeing a psychiatrist named Dr. Nina Lawson, Carl said. She specializes in geriatric cognitive disorders. He's told her that you're showing signs of advanced dementia, aggression, paranoia, inability to manage your finances. That's a lie, all of it. I know, but here's the thing. She's never met you. Everything she knows comes from Brandon, and based on his reports, she's drafted a preliminary assessment recommending a competency evaluation. I stared at the document. There it was in black and white. Patient displays significant cognitive decline consistent with moderate to severe dementia. family reports, paranoid ideation, financial mismanagement, and failure to maintain personal hygiene. Personal hygiene. I showered every day. I wore clean clothes. It was an outright fabrication. He's creating a paper trail, I said. Exactly. And once he has enough documentation, he'll petition the court. I sat back. This was real. This was happening. My own nephew was methodically constructing a lie that would strip me of my freedom, my home, my life savings. What do I do? Carl leaned forward. You get your own documentation. Dr. Okonkwo's evaluation is a start, but you need more. Bank records showing you manage your finances perfectly well. Statements from people who interact with you regularly. And, he tapped the folder, you let him file. You let him bring this to court, and then you destroy him with evidence he doesn't know you have. I looked at the folder, at the photographs, at the fraudulent psychiatric assessment. There was no going back now. The next move was his, but the winning move would be mine. The petition arrived on a Tuesday. I was having lunch when the doorbell rang. A process server handed me a thick envelope with a tight, professional smile. You've been served, sir. I stood in my doorway and read it. Petitioner Brandon Michael Carson versus Daniel James Carson, petition for appointment of conservator. The document requested that the court declare me incapacitated and grant Brandon full control over my financial affairs and healthcare decisions. The hearing was set for 6 weeks out. I called Helen Marchetti immediately. She wasn't surprised. Now we respond, she said. We file our opposition and we prepare our case. He thinks he's the only one with documentation. He's wrong. Over the next week, I assembled everything. Dr. Okonkwo's cognitive evaluation. Bank records showing consistent, appropriate account management. The login records from Brandon's IP address. Photographs from Carl's surveillance. The unmarked pills with the pharmacist's identification. And the fraudulent psychiatric assessment from Dr. Lawson. Helen arranged for 3 additional expert witnesses. A geriatric psychiatrist who would evaluate me independently, a forensic accountant who would testify to my financial competence, and a digital forensic specialist who would authenticate the unauthorized account access. My folder grew thick. 200 pages. 300. Every lie Brandon had told, every manipulation, every fabrication, all documented, dated, and verified. Then Brandon found out I was fighting back. I don't know how he learned. Maybe he had someone watching me. Maybe he called Helen's office and someone mentioned my name. But one evening, as I was making dinner, my doorbell rang. Brandon stood on my porch. He wasn't smiling. Uncle Dan, we need to talk. I let him in. I didn't have a choice. Refusing would only make him suspicious. We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd watched 100 football games together. But now the camera in the corner was recording. I know you've hired a lawyer, he said. I know you're planning to fight this. Of course I'm fighting it. You're trying to take everything I have. His expression shifted. Wounded, hurt. The performance of a victim. I'm trying to help you, Uncle Dan. You're not well. You don't realize how much you've been slipping. The confusion, the paranoia, it's getting worse. I'm doing this because I love you. You drugged me. Silence. His face went blank for just a moment, the mask slipping, before the concern snapped back into place. I don't know what you're talking about. The pills in my medicine cabinet, diphenhydramine, high dose, you put them there to make me confused. That's insane! Do you hear yourself? This is exactly what I'm talking about! I had them tested. I have records. I have everything, Brandon. He stared at me. And in that moment, I saw it, the calculation behind his eyes. He was assessing. How much did I know? How much could I prove? Then his demeanor changed. Okay, he said quietly. Let's say hypothetically that someone made a mistake, a bad choice, out of desperation. He leaned forward. I'm in debt, Uncle Dan. A lot of debt. Bad investments, a failed business. I owe people money, dangerous people. I was scared. I wasn't thinking clearly. So you decided to steal from me. I was going to take care of you, I swear. I wasn't going to abandon you in some facility. I just needed access to the money. You created a fake psychiatric evaluation. You told a doctor I was demented. He winced. I can make that go away. I'll tell Dr. Lawson I was mistaken. I'll drop the petition. We can forget this whole thing. Just, please, don't destroy me. I watched him. This was the nephew I'd raised, the boy I'd taken fishing. And here he was, bargaining for his survival with the same mouth he'd used to lie about my mind. Get out! Uncle Dan, get out of my house. He stood slowly. At the door he turned back. You're making a mistake. I tried to do this the easy way. You won't like the hard way. Then he was gone. I sat in my empty living room, heart pounding. The threat was clear. He wasn't going to back down. Whatever came next would be worse. But I had it all on camera. His confession, his threat. One more piece of evidence. I added it to the folder. That night, I drove to the coast. I rented a small motel room in Cannon Beach and sat on the balcony, watching the waves break against the rocks. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. For 2 days, I did nothing. I walked on the beach. I ate fish and chips from a roadside stand. I let the sound of the ocean quiet the noise in my head. Brandon wanted a war. Fine, I was ready. But first, I needed to rest. I returned to Portland on a Thursday morning, calmer than I'd been in months. The ocean air had cleared something in my mind. Not just stress, but the last traces of doubt. I knew who Brandon was now. I knew what he was capable of. And I knew how this would end. He tried one more time. A week after my return, I received a phone call. Not from Brandon, from his mother, my sister-in-law Maureen. Daniel, please, can we just talk about this? Brandon made mistakes, but he's family. Surely we can work something out. Did he silence on the line? Then, he said you've been confused, that you're misremembering things. Of course he did. I have documentation, Maureen, evidence. I'm not misremembering anything. Oh, so you're going to destroy him? Send him to prison? Your own nephew? He tried to destroy me first. She hung up. I didn't blame her. She was his mother. But I couldn't let sentiment cloud my judgment. Not anymore. The weeks before the hearing passed slowly. I kept to my routine. Morning coffee, a walk around the neighborhood, afternoons reviewing my case file with Helen. I met with her team, the psychiatrist, the forensic accountant, the digital expert, and went over their testimony until I knew it cold. What I didn't expect was the kindness of strangers. One afternoon, my neighbor Nancy knocked on my door. She was 72, a retired teacher who'd lived on the street for 30 years. I knew her mostly from waves across the driveway. I heard what's happening, she said. My daughter works at the courthouse. I wanted you to know. If you need someone to testify that you're of sound mind, I will. I was stunned. You'd do that? Daniel, I've watched you maintain this house for 15 years. You mow your lawn, you shovel your walk, you bring in your trash cans the same day every week. Does that sound like a man who can't manage his own affairs? She wasn't the only one. Mike Chen from the pharmacy offered to provide a statement about my medication management. Helen, the attorney, noted that my correspondence with her office had been consistently clear and organized. Even Carl Reeves said he'd testify about Brandon's surveillance awareness, the lengths my nephew had gone to cover his tracks. I was building more than a legal case. I was building a wall of witnesses, and through all of it Brandon went quiet. Carl reported that he'd stopped meeting with Dr. Lawson. He wasn't returning calls from his own attorney. He was holed up in his apartment, barely leaving except for groceries. He's scared, Carl said. He knows you've got something. He just doesn't know what. Good, let him wonder. I spent evenings reading. Not legal documents, novels, things I'd meant to get to for years. It felt strange, indulging myself while the hearing loomed. But I needed to remember what I was fighting for. My life, my peace, the freedom to sit on my own porch and read whatever I wanted without someone trying to convince me I'd lost my mind. The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep much. But it wasn't from anxiety. It was anticipation. Tomorrow, Brandon would learn just how badly he'd underestimated me. The morning of the hearing, I put on my best suit, charcoal grey, the one I'd worn to Sandra's funeral. I wanted to look sharp, composed, competent. Every detail mattered. I arrived at the courthouse an hour early. Helen was already there, reviewing notes. Carl Reeves sat in the back row, ready to testify. Dr. Okonkwo was on standby by phone. Then Brandon walked in. He looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. His attorney, a young guy who couldn't have been more than 30, walked beside him, murmuring reassurances. Brandon didn't look at me, not once. But before the judge arrived, something unexpected happened. Brandon's attorney approached Helen. "My client would like to discuss a settlement." Helen glanced at me. I nodded. We stepped into a side room. Brandon sat across the table, finally meeting my eyes. He looked exhausted, defeated. "Uncle Dan, I know I messed up. But you don't have to do this. You don't have to drag everything into open court." He swallowed. "What if I drop the petition? What if I sign something saying I'll never try this again? We can walk away, both of us." I studied him. The desperation was real. But so was the calculation. I could see it flickering beneath the surface. "And the debt? The people you owe?" He flinched. "I'll figure it out. That's not your problem. You made it my problem when you tried to steal $3 million from me. I was going to pay it back. No." I leaned forward. "You were going to take everything. My house, my savings, my freedom. You were going to lock me away and spend my money until there was nothing left." He said nothing. "And you know what makes it worse? You almost had me convinced. You almost made me believe I was losing my mind. Do you have any idea what that's like? Doubting your own thoughts? Wondering if every memory is real?" His jaw tightened. For just a moment the mask cracked, and I saw something ugly underneath. Resentment. Entitlement. "You had all that money just sitting there," he said quietly. $3 million. You were never going to spend it. You were just going to let it rot in accounts while I drowned. There it was. The real Brandon. The one who believed he deserved what I had. The one who saw my life savings as his inheritance, already owed. I stood up. "I'll see you in the courtroom." I walked out. Behind me I heard him slam his hand on the table. 10 minutes later the hearing began. Judge Patricia Moreno presided. She was in her 60s, sharp-eyed, known for her no-nonsense approach. She reviewed the petition, then looked at me. "Mr. Carson, your nephew has filed this petition claiming you lack the capacity to manage your own affairs. Before we proceed with testimony, is there anything you'd like to say?" I stood. Helen nodded. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence that this petition is based on fraudulent documentation and is part of a deliberate scheme to defraud me of my estate." The courtroom went silent. Brandon's attorney half rose from his seat, objecting, but Judge Moreno waved him down. "Let's see what you have, Mr. Carson." I handed the folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. She opened it to the first page. "This is a cognitive evaluation conducted by Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, a board-certified neurologist." I explained. "It shows that my mental function is completely normal, better than average for my age." Judge Moreno examined it carefully, then turned the page. Her eyebrows rose. "And these? Bank records showing consistent, appropriate management of my finances. No missed payments, no unusual withdrawals, no signs of confusion. Also, login records proving that someone accessed my accounts without authorization, 17 times from my nephew's IP address." Brandon shifted in his seat. His attorney whispered something urgently. The judge kept turning pages. Photographs of Brandon meeting with Dr. Lawson, the fraudulent psychiatric assessment, the pharmacist's identification of the diphenhydramine pills found in my medicine cabinet. When she reached the video transcript, she stopped, read it slowly, then looked up at Brandon. "Mr. Carson," she said, addressing him, not me, "is it true you placed unmarked medication in your uncle's home without his knowledge?" Brandon's attorney jumped in. "Your Honor, my client denies—" "I'm asking your client." Brandon's face had gone pale. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his attorney. Then back at the judge. I was trying to help him sleep. He'd been so anxious. Without a prescription? Without his knowledge?" Judge Moreno's voice was ice. And did you also visit a psychiatrist to provide false information about his mental state? She misunderstood what I... The assessment recommends a competency evaluation based on, quote, family reports of paranoid ideation, financial mismanagement, and failure to maintain personal hygiene. Your uncle is sitting in front of me in a perfectly pressed suit, having submitted impeccable financial records. Do you stand by those reports? Brandon said nothing. Judge Moreno closed the folder. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of the bench. I'm dismissing this petition. There is no credible evidence that Daniel Carson lacks the capacity to manage his own affairs. In fact, the evidence suggests the opposite, that he has been the victim of a calculated attempt at financial exploitation by a family member. She looked at Brandon. Mr. Carson, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of possible criminal conduct, including fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. Brandon's face crumpled. His attorney grabbed his arm, hissing something about appeals, about options, but Brandon wasn't listening. He was staring at me, and in his eyes I saw something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not fear, disbelief. He hadn't thought I could do it. He'd been so sure I was just a confused old man, easy to manipulate, easy to control. And now, in the span of 20 minutes, his whole scheme had collapsed. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The judge called security. Not for me. The aftermath came quickly. Within 2 weeks, the district attorney's office opened a formal investigation. Brandon was charged with attempted fraud, forgery of medical documents, and elder abuse. Dr. Nina Lawson faced an ethics inquiry from the state medical board. She'd written that assessment without ever meeting me, relying solely on Brandon's word. That kind of negligence ended careers. Brandon's attorney tried to negotiate. Probation, community service, a promise to pay restitution. But the DA wasn't interested in deals. Oregon had been cracking down on elder financial abuse, and this case was exactly the kind they wanted to prosecute publicly. The trial lasted 4 days. I testified on the second day. I walked through the whole thing: the pills, the gaslighting, the fake psychiatric evaluation, the petition, calmly, clearly, without emotion. Helen had coached me. Don't get angry. Don't get sad. Just tell the truth and let the evidence speak. It did. Carl Reeves testified about his surveillance. The forensic accountant explained the unauthorized account access. Dr. Okonkwo confirmed my cognitive health. Mike Chen from the pharmacy identified the diphenhydramine. Nancy, my neighbor, took the stand and described me as the most organized person on the block. Brandon's defense tried to paint him as a desperate man, overwhelmed by debt, making bad decisions out of fear. But desperation wasn't a defense for fraud, and the jury didn't buy it. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was 3 weeks later. Brandon stood in the same courtroom where I'd submitted my folder, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His mother Maureen was in the gallery, crying. His father Richard, my brother, sat beside her, staring at the floor. The judge sentenced Brandon to 4 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. He was ordered to pay restitution of $50,000, the estimated cost of my legal fees, the private investigator, and the emotional distress he'd caused. When the bailiff led him away, Brandon looked back at me. Just for a moment. I thought he might say something, an apology, a curse, anything. He didn't. He just looked away. I watched. Outside the courthouse, Helen shook my hand. You did it. A lot of people in your position wouldn't have fought this hard. I didn't have a choice. She smiled. I drove home alone. The house was quiet. I sat in my living room, the same room where Brandon had threatened me, where I'd recorded his confession. And I breathed. It was over. The first year after the trial was about rebuilding. I changed my locks, updated my will with Helen's help. Everything now went to a trust that would distribute funds to charities Sandra and I had always supported. I closed the investment accounts that had been compromised and opened new ones at a different firm with stricter security protocols. I also started volunteering, The Multnomah County District Attorney's Office had a program for elder abuse awareness. I spoke at community centers, senior living facilities, church groups. I told my story, not for sympathy, but as a warning. How it starts small, how they make you doubt yourself, how the people you trust most can be the ones who betray you. It felt good to do something useful with what I'd been through. I traveled. Nancy, my neighbor, became a real friend. We had dinner together once a week, trading stories about our spouses, our careers, the neighborhood we'd both watched change over the decades. She was good company. She didn't ask about Brandon. As for Brandon, I heard things through the family grapevine, reluctantly, because I'd cut contact with Richard and Maureen, but news traveled anyway. He was in the correctional facility in Salem. The first year he'd tried to appeal the conviction. It went nowhere. The second year he got into a fight with another inmate and had time added to his sentence. Maureen visited him every month. Richard didn't. When Brandon finally got out, 3.5 years with good behavior, he was 46. He had a felony record, no job prospects, and a restitution debt he'd be paying off for years. He moved into Maureen's basement. The last I heard, he was working part-time at a warehouse, still trying to get back on his feet. I didn't feel sorry for him, but I didn't feel triumphant either. He'd made his choices. He was living with them. My brother Richard called me once, about 2 years after the trial. He wanted to apologize for not seeing what was happening, for not stopping Brandon, for taking so long to reach out. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear, Daniel, I didn't know what he was doing." I believed him. Richard was never the sharpest, and Brandon had always known how to manage his parents. But I also wasn't ready to forgive. "I appreciate the call," I said, "but I need more time. We haven't spoken since. These days I'm 61, healthy, sharp as ever according to Dr. Okonkwo. I've got money in the bank, a house I own outright, and a life I built on my own terms. And every morning I wake up knowing that no one can take it away from me, because I fought for it, because I documented everything, because when my own family tried to destroy me, I refused to let them. So here's my question for you. What would you do? If someone you loved, someone you trusted, started making you doubt your own mind, would you see it in time? Would you fight back? Or would you let them convince you that you were the problem? Elder exploitation happens every day. It happens in nice families, in good neighborhoods, to smart people who never saw it coming. If you're watching this and something feels wrong, if someone's asking too many questions about your money, if you're suddenly forgetting things you know you didn't forget, trust your gut. Document everything. Get help. And if you know someone in that situation, believe them. Don't assume they're confused. Don't assume the family member is just being helpful. Ask questions. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment below. Tell me what you would have done differently. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want more stories like this, about people who fought back and won, subscribe to the channel. There's plenty more where this came from. Thanks for listening.